Welcome to another wonderful Saturday. So I know that many of you may be used to seeing me over on the Amethyst Cave. This is the start of a new series that I'm going to be doing kind of in and out in between my usual Saturday channelings, because this is all on a topic that is another one of my greatest loves, as I'm sure many of you have heard me say many times over, and that is the art of storytelling. And through this particular series, I am going to be exploring many different aspects of stories, from hey Tina, so glad to have you join. So I'll be exploring many aspects of stories throughout this series, from how we can use stories to heal, from how we use stories to empower ourselves, different practices that we can specifically apply with stories, and different practices that kind of branch off of the whole art of storytelling that goes into what is known as the mythic imagination. So that's one of the things that I'll talk a little bit more about in the live today. So I will get to that if you're unfamiliar with that particular term. And also, because this is all about storytelling, I am absolutely going to be telling some stories that'll both be drawn from personal experience, because our personal experiences are stories. We are living a story right now. And also drawing on the stories of our collective unconsciousness, which we call myths, legends, folk tales, fairy tales. So I'll be drawing on those. I'll also be drawing on more modern stories as well that come in the form of the novels and movies and music that we listen to. So this is going to be all over the map, and I'm really excited about it, because I was guided to start doing this by Spirit. Well, they've been asking me to do this for quite a while. Quite a while, and I've just put it off because it's a very big topic. And from past experiences that I've had about just exploring this topic in different spheres, specifically when I was going through to become a teacher, this was one of my main areas that I really focused on in terms of my teaching studies, and things that I was talking about that were important to bring into the classroom. And doing that over there, even, I was often coming across people who, the moment they heard the word storytelling or stories, they had these walls go up, and then they backed away. Not necessarily literally, but very much in that mental kind of, they just had that distance, because so many of us, just with the way our society is formed, have been raised to think of stories and storytelling in specific ways that either make us treat them like just fiction, things that aren't real, things that aren't possible, things that are meant as escapism and there for us to just run away from the real world. When in reality, stories are probably one of the most real things that we can tap into beyond directly tapping into spirit. And then the other thing, of course, with stories is the creation part of stories. And the moment the word creation or creativity gets mentioned, again, those walls go up and a lot of people back away because they were sadly told, or just grew into that awareness based on childhood judgments and perceptions, that they were not creative, which again is entirely untrue. As I've heard spirits say so many times, we're all creative beings. And really, it's just a matter of remembering that and realizing that and rediscovering it and practicing it, which is also part of what I'm going to bring into this series that I'm starting to do as well, to support those of you who may be less in touch with that side that perhaps you were really in touch with as a child, as most of us were, or perhaps you are still really in touch with it, and we'll just dig in deeper. So that is just a quick overview of a little bit of where I'm getting nudged with this particular series, just to start off with. And this live today is going to be very much an introduction into storytelling. I'm going to talk about what the mythic imagination is, and I wanted to bring in a few practices as well that all of you may be doing, or maybe you haven't been doing, but either way, I'm going to be encouraging you guys to go and try some different practices out and bring them into your day-to-day schedule as much as you can. We're even doing it once a week, whatever resonates. But that's me getting ahead of myself a little bit. And one of the things that always drew me to stories, that draws most of us to stories, is the magic of it, the atmosphere that is created, the sensory experience that goes beyond the physical. And so what I wanted to start off with is probably the number one practice that I always use as a storyteller myself, and I also use it for just about everything else. Anytime I'm working through something, or I want to explore something that's come up in the moment, or something that's just been lingering, and that is visualization, which again, I'm sure many of you have perhaps done. Maybe you've explored it just a little bit, or you've just heard about it. So I invite all of you to just take a few deep breaths in and out. In and out. And we're going to go on a little journey together. So as you breathe in and out, you may be aware of your body. Take notice of it, where it is. But then, as you breathe out, let go of that and focus instead on imagining in your mind that you are standing on a path. The path you can feel under your feet It is hard, a little pebbly. Sand or dirt. And ahead, in the space where you're standing, you start noticing a light that just begins as a pinprick. And as you breathe in and out and you focus more upon it, it begins to grow and grow, and you begin to walk toward this light. And as you walk closer to it, and as it grows and grows, you see it is a doorway. And beyond this doorway is a beach. This beach stretches ahead, seeming to go for miles and miles. The ocean rushes up to the beach and then pulls back, rushes up and then pulls back. You hear seagulls in the distance. The sand is warm and soft under your feet. And as you are walking along this beach, you turn off toward where there are tall grasses, and there is another path going up toward hills that rise toward the deep blue sky, where there are only a few clouds in the distance. This path, as you walk along it, crunches underneath your feet. You hear rustling in the grasses. From birds and other small animals. There is a soft breeze. And you keep walking this path as it goes up and up the first hill. And then there is a second hill that you see in the distance. And then a third. And now you are beginning to see what is all around you, what is ahead of you. And you begin to remember what you were here for. What you were here for. Lies beyond those three hills, where there is a deep green forest that stretches further on and further on until it too touches something more. Great gray slate mountains that stretch into that deep blue sky, speckled with only a few clouds. Those mountains are where you are going. but you are on the first hill. Bring your attention back to this first hill where you are still walking. One step after another. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Count the sounds of the animals that you hear around you. Do you hear birds? What do the birds sound like? Can you name the birds that you hear? Or perhaps you hear small animals rustling. Are they mice? Gophers? Perhaps a slightly bigger animal, like a stoat or a badger or a fox. Perhaps a garter snake pokes out of the grass and begins to run along the path. Or a flock of birds burst out of the grass. Whatever you notice, when it catches your senses, stop and watch it. Watch the birds, the snake. Listen to the rustling, the chatter of the birds. Feel the wind across your face. And as you are doing this, you are taking one step after another step. This has brought you, at last, to the front of the deep green woods. And it is here, into the real unknown, that you will truly begin to explore, to discover more animals, name them, to discover more plants and name them, to experience with all your senses. And that mountain in the distance that you know you are getting to, it is there. But you are focused on the woods before you, on feeling the bark of the trees, on hearing the bubble of a brook, stopping to sit on a mossy rock, and so much more. Take in a deep breath and let it out. Take in as many deep breaths and let them out as you need, as you bring yourself back to awareness in your physical body. Yourself out a little bit and open your eyes whenever you are ready. So, the wonderful thing about stories is they're all some sort of journey that takes us into Even if it's a story that we're familiar with, one that we have read over and over and over again, or perhaps it's one that we feel like we have been living over and over and over again. Whatever the case is, always holding to each moment and celebrating the little things, the little pieces of magic, the things that we pick up in those moments is what makes the stories so special and what makes living so amazing. It's part of my daily practice that whenever I go anywhere, whether it's me just walking up to the grocery store, which is only a 10-minute walk away, or me taking a bus for much longer out to work with young children and helping them to learn how to read. Whatever the path is that I'm doing on my day-to-day, I always make a habit of looking for something new, of looking out the window or looking out around me and noticing at least one thing that I haven't noticed before, or at the very least noticing something and saying thank you, or just soaking up the beauty or the quirkiness of it. For example, this morning when I was taking my 10-minute walk up to the grocery store, it's an absolutely beautiful day out. Really beautiful, sunny island day. We're finally into spring. Happy spring, by the way. It is the wonderful spring equinox. And lo and behold, because it's the kind of city I live in, so I really shouldn't be surprised, but there was a man skating down the Beach Drive Road that I was walking along on his longboard, and he was in just a kilt. Didn't have anything else on. Well, he had sandals, oddly enough. At the very least. I've seen people walk around the city without any shoes on, but he had sandals and a kilt, and he was longboarding, and it made me laugh, and I was just felt so appreciative to have just run across somebody while I was out for my regular grocery walk that is the same every single time. That something so quirky that just made me laugh and appreciate the environment that I live in, that not only naturally is just gorgeous, but it also attracts a lot of wonderfully unique individuals who are just living their best life, whatever it may be. Which in that particular gentleman's case was really, really soaking up the wonderfully warm sun in just his kilt while longboarding. So there you have a bit of a funny story for this morning. But back on track. Though I will definitely, because this is all about storytelling, things may go off on certain directions that'll be very circular. The visualization that I very quickly kind of ran us all through just to set the space, set the mood, spark a little bit of magic, was a very straightforward one that was pretty much just bringing yourself into a space that is not where you literally are, and then just walking through it, kind of a straight A to B sort of exploration. Other things that I definitely recommend you try with visualization if you haven't is it is a wonderful way to really actively explore dreams that you have been having. So if you're someone who really easily remembers your dreams, then in your waking hours, sitting down and back in that dream and exploring it very consciously and actively is a great way to work with whatever symbols, whatever messages were coming up in that particular dream. Another way to use visualization is to also put yourself into memories that you have that are either ones that you want to work through to release, or they are memories that you use to center yourself and bring yourself into a high vibrational state, perhaps after a moment where you kind of dipped a little bit and you're like, okay, center myself, taking deep breaths, imagining something that brings you a lot of joy. And I'm sure many of you have done that kind of thing before, and that's visualization. And another way to use visualization as well is for those of you who are really creative, you've probably done this before. Those of you who don't yet feel connected with your creativity, visualization is a great way to explore it by simply doing that thing that I know we all have done when we were of school age, which was daydreaming because we were really, really bored in math class, or maybe you really liked math, so maybe it's science class you were bored in. But whatever the case, you were really bored in class and you daydreamed. That is also visualization. And it's another great thing to bring into your day-to-day practice, to just actively sit down and either let your mind wander wherever it may, or have a specific intention in mind of where you're going to go. So I'm going to delve into this a little bit further, because I've definitely gotten over the years many questions from people who talk about how they really struggle to imagine, or on the other, extremely busy mind that jumps from one idea to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and so on and so forth. And wherever you may sit on that spectrum of struggling to imagine to having this crazy overactive imagination, it all comes back to practice. I know, practice, practice, practice. Yeah, it always does. It makes me laugh and sigh a little bit because I'm always like, really? It's that easy? But come on. It is. And it's about making visualization, making imagination part of your day-to-day practice. Many of you have probably done things like this when you were a child. For example, looking at the clouds and looking for shapes in those clouds, or looking at a tiled floor or a tiled ceiling or a wall that's got a particular pattern on it, and again, looking for shapes. Just noticing those teeny tiny things. When you are sitting down and perhaps meditating, if that's part of your day-to-day practice, or whenever or however often you do that, then also visualizing in your mind something. You can start with just visualizing an orange in your mind, or an apple, something nice and simple, that as you visualize it, you notice not only its shape, its size, its color, but you notice how it might feel if you were to put it in your hand, or you imagine how it would taste if you were to bite into that fruit, or how it smells. And then you might take the apple or orange and expand it to different shapes. So different triangles or a pyramid or a cube, or imagining objects like a box or a tree or the ocean or just a pond, and expanding out further from that. You might even imagine a specific room in your apartment or house that you're not currently sitting in, and just walk yourself in your mind toward that room and make yourself walk through that room and touch different objects in that room. So really just have fun with wherever your imagination takes you. And if you have a roadblock where you sit down one day and you're trying and trying and trying to imagine a specific space or a specific, tapping into your senses, you're not getting the smell of it, the feel of it, maybe you're just getting a vague color of it. You're doing it at the very least. You're sitting down and you're just doing it. And it takes practice. This is where I'm going to quote one of my favorite fictional quotes that I use all the time. I used to use all the time as a teacher too. I had it up on my whiteboard permanently. And it is, do or do not. There is no try, which is said by the wonderful Jedi Master Yoda from Star Wars. So just know that whatever you're doing with visualization, with building your imagination, that so long as you're sitting down and just doing it and making it a practice, even if you don't fully see the thing that you're trying to imagine, you're sitting down and you're doing it. Hey Jennifer, wonderful to see you here. Hello to everyone else too who said hi. Hey Kirsty and Linda. I know I've kind of just continued diving into this whole topic today. And I'm curious actually, since I've taken a pause on what I was talking about, if any of you regularly put visualization practices into whatever you do on a day-to-day basis, or if it's part of just whatever you do once a week, or however often any of your practices might be. I am curious, I'm always curious what other people do for visualization, or how many people still do that wonderful practice of you're standing in a line and you stare off at some sort of distant point and you start seeing those shapes. Because that's the beginning of some of the imagination. Alright. So just to finish off this beginning segment just about the visualization practice, whatever you're doing, whether it's just imagining one little apple in your mind, or you are walking yourself through a whole space, or you are perhaps imagining a particular being or an archetype that you wish to connect with, which is a whole other thing known as pathwork. Probably be what I'll talk about on another video. Because usually whenever I do pathworking, then I also have spirit dropping in and having all sorts of things that they want to say as well. And I wanted to keep today just largely a bit of an introduction into some basic practices of storytelling and just what the mythic imagination is. So above all, whatever you're doing with visualization, whether you are doing it just for fun, just to practice strengthening that particular muscle, because the visualization muscle is a muscle. It's really associated with specific clairs as well. So your clairvoyance, clairaudience are very linked with visualization. So the more you're practicing visualization, the more those two clairs will also begin to strengthen as well. But whatever you're doing, know that this is always a process, that even if you're doing it to pick apart a dream or pick apart a memory that you no longer wish to hold on to, that keeps popping up every single day, that because we're living a story, there's no solving or fixing things that is ever needed. The wonderful thing about stories is they're cyclical. They just keep going around and around and around and around, and believe me, I've had some times in the past where that was frustrating to me. I was just like, I just want to be done. I want to get there, be finished. But no, that's not the case. It's always just continuing to move around, and when you reach maybe back where you started, now you're just going into a deeper level and a deeper level. And I'm also going to be talking about cycles and storytelling in a little bit too. Alright. So, kind of moving off of the visualization, a huge part of storytelling that's linked into what I keep calling the mythic imagination is dreams. Mythic imagination, the way that I like to define it, although if you're the sort of person who's into reading lots and lots of things, there are tons of books out there about it, going right back to the original people who kind of started exploring it, which was Carl Jung, was a huge... all of his work was really focused in around dreams and dream theory and this idea of mythic imagination. So you can go right back to that stuff, but the way I see it, especially with how my work with spirit has also kind of linked it all together, is that it's the art, the practice of tapping into ourselves, into this well of self. I always like imagining ourselves as this deep well. And drawing out of ourselves then the waters of knowledge. And I'm holding I've got my hand kind of like this because I always imagine that drawing out of our well of self by using a chalice. So I've always got this chalice in mind that's kind of like this gold bronze sort of thing, kind of that honestly looks a lot like the Holy Grail because I'm steeped in all sorts of stories like that, so it looks like that to me. And I dip it in, and then there I've got in my chalice this water of knowledge that I've drawn out of myself. And then drinking it consciously, and then it flowing back into myself is then allowing me to grow into that wisdom that was hidden deep, deep down in that water. So that's how I see the mythic imagination. It's very much a process of engaging with ourselves very directly. So absolutely, when you're doing visualization, when you're doing dream work, when you're working with imagination and creativity, you can tap into spirit and have all sorts of beings come in and work with you. I have that happen all the time, but ultimately it comes down to you're just working with yourself and that whole deep well that you've got within, and just slowly pulling up a cup and exploring what's in that cup, and then drinking it and letting it flow back in, and kind of cleansing yourself as well. It's a very much a circular sort of well that, just like the cycle of water here on the earth, where, fun fact, I did not realize this, but the water that is currently here on the earth has been here on the earth for billions and billions and billions of years. Essentially, when water first arose on the physical plane of this earth, that's the water that's still around today, because it just keeps cycling over and over. So, random fun fact, I can't remember the exact date off the top of my head because it's a large number, but I was like, that is so cool. We are really just teeny tiny microcosms of this earthly plane. Quite literally. Alright. So my comment section has kind of gone down a little bit, so I just wanted to catch up on a couple comments while I pause here. Yeah, Kersey, exactly. It is sometimes hard to just click that visualization into action, but yeah, the moment it starts, ooh, here's that water metaphor again. The flood just happens, and it's amazing and wonderful. Yeah, there you go. Your yoga pants just gave you an idea for a knitting pattern. Oh my gosh, exactly. It's amazing how just the smallest things that we surround ourselves with can inspire us, and how they influence us, which, thank you, Kersey, actually very smoothly transitions into what I wanted to talk about with the mythic imagination, and that is all the things that are around us, that influence us, that have created the reality, the story that we are currently living, the reality and the story that we have lived. It's absolutely crazy how much influences us, and it can be, yeah, teeny tiny things, just like idly staring at a pair of yoga pants and then suddenly you've got that idea. And it goes right back to childhood and the things that we were fascinated with as a child. So, inviting all of you to think all the way back to when you were a child, whether you want to imagine when you were 5 or maybe when you were 8, whatever is in around the one of the younger ages that just stands out to you. Because it's really fascinating how much from then feeds into who we are now. And for this bit, I wanted to delve into a little bit of story time, just to share a wonderful story from my childhood that was extremely influential, and then also just do some exploration with this story with all of you, since I do want to bring some sort of story into at least even this introductory live. So when I was about 6 years old, I had this little storybook, picture book, that was called Mouse's Magic Paints, that I was obsessed with. Like all 6-year-olds, it's very easy to get obsessed with a certain thing. And I was so obsessed with it that I had it memorized. I knew the story back to front, word for word. And because I knew it back to front, word for word, and just adored it, I would, every night when my dad would sit down with me and my one brother who I had at the time so far, and he asked what we wanted to read that night, I would immediately start reciting out Mouse's magic paints because it was imperative. It had to be told every single night. And then once I'd tell the story and feel really proud and really excited about that story, then my brother was allowed to actually go pick a story that he wanted read. So this story, I don't have it physically with me. So what I'm doing too, which is also illustrative of the way that we work with stories and we experience stories, in that you don't have to have things memorized word for word. You don't have to know the meanings of every single little thing in a story to be able to tell a story. What the point is, as the storyteller, is tapping into the essence of the story that resonates with you, and that's what comes out. It's why oral storytelling is always described as a type of storytelling that changes with every single teller. It's why those old myths, those legends, those folktales have so many different versions out there, because depending on who was telling the story, there was one, a particular lens of the story through the storyteller, and two, the storyteller may or may not have had a particular intention, a particular reason for why they were telling the stories. Because especially with myths, there are, well, myths as a whole were used as an ancient teaching tool to do everything from teaching basic social mores right up to this is the movement of Saturn and Mars in the sky, which is really cool. Science is being taught through myths. Or was. Anyway, I'm getting off track. So this is the story of Mouse's magic paints. And as I tell this, I just want you to think about, what are you getting from this story? What are you feeling? What are you sensing? What do you learn or understand from this story? Whether it's just pure enjoyment, tapping back into your own childhood, or something else. There was a little mouse who loved to paint. Painting was his most favorite activity in the whole wide world. He did it every single day. And because he did it every single day, he very quickly ran out of paint. And the morning when he woke up and he went to go and paint, and he realized, as he put his paintbrush into all the jars, that there was no paint left. He felt very, very sad. But he knew, because this had happened before, that he just had to go down to the village, paint. So remembering this, he would just have to walk down to the village to buy more paint. He felt a little happier as he got on his coat and his shoes and his hat, and he began to walk down from his house, which sat way up on a hill by a forest, to the village. And as he walked to the village, he began to skip and he began to sing, really happy and very excited that he was going to soon have more paints so that he could go back to painting. And he was so focused on just getting down the hill to the village that he didn't notice the old mouse woman until he almost ran into her. He stumbled back, saying an apology for nearly running into the old mouse woman. And he was so apologetic that he told the old mouse woman, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm a painter. I'm a painter. Would you love to have one of my paintings? I am just going down to the village to get more paints. But when I buy more paints and I get back to my house, I can paint you a painting. And I will give it to you. I am so sorry, old mouse woman," he said. And the old mouse woman smiled at him and patted him on the head and said, "Thank you, little mouse. All I want you to do is just watch where you're going. But I would love to have a painting. You seem to be a wonderful painter. And in fact, I have some paints that you might like. If you take these paints, can you paint me a painting with these?" And she pulled out from underneath the cloak that she wore a whole palette of paints that seemed to sparkle with brighter color than any paints the little mouse had ever seen before. The reds were so red. Oranges were more orange than orange. The greens were more green than any grass. "Thank you, old mouse woman," said the little mouse. "I will paint you a painting with these paints. I would love to." And so he took the paints. And as he took the paints, he excitedly was looking at all the colors, not focusing on the old mouse woman. And when he looked up to tell her thank you once more and ask her if she would like to come back to his house while he painted the painting, she was gone. The little mouse was confused, but then thought, well, maybe she just went off to the village. And so, with new paints, the little mouse ran all the way back home as quick as he could and went straight to his workshop. And he began to paint. And as he painted, he forgot about doing something specifically for the old mouse woman. He just painted whatever he thought of. The first thing he painted was a bright orange in a basket. And when he finished this painting, and he set it aside, pulling out another canvas to start a new painting, he turned back to see that the painting with the oranges in the basket had gone, and in its place, sitting on the floor underneath the easel, was a basket full of oranges. The little mouse was confused, and so he quickly started painting something else to see what had happened, wondering, are these magic paints? And so, for his next painting, he did a pair of red trousers. And sure enough, when he finished the painting, and he set it aside, a moment later, the painting was gone, and in its place were a pair of red trousers. Very excited now, the little mouse began painting everything that he had ever wanted. He painted himself a new shirt, a new hat with a feather. He painted himself a little bird for a friend, because he'd lived all alone up in his little house. And he painted and he painted and he painted. And soon, all his painting attracted everyone from the village, who began to ask him, paint something for us. Paint us new clothes. Paint us some food for dinner. And so he did. And he painted and he painted and he painted. All the while, all through that day, forgetting about the old mouse woman. And getting so excited about all the things that he could create with his paints. Until it was finally night, and the little mouse was so tired. He had painted and painted and painted and painted. So he went to bed, tired but happy. And when he woke up the next morning, he rushed excitedly into his workshop to start painting again. Curious, what else could he think of that he could make for real? But when he entered his workshop, he stopped and realized, as he turned around, the baskets of fruit, the flowers he had made, they were gone. And he walked back through his little cottage and noticed that everything he had painted, the new walls, the new sets of chairs, the new hat with the feather that he had painted, his red trousers, they were all gone. Everything he had painted was gone. Even the magic paints. Frantic, the little mouse ran out of his house, down the hill, and as he ran, he remembered what the old mouse woman had said to him the other day, for him to slow down, to look around himself, and that he had never actually painted something for her. So he stopped running halfway down the hill, started to walk, and began to see bright butterflies that were the brightest blues he had ever seen, the brightest purples he had ever seen. He saw grass that was the greenest green. And the path that was usually just a brown seemed to sparkle with little bits of silver and gold in the dirt itself. And as he walked, noticing all these bright colors, he saw the old mouse woman standing where he had run into her the day before. And she said, "Hello, little mouse, hello." "Did you paint a painting for me?" And the little mouse said, "No, old mouse woman, I am sorry. I forgot. But would you walk with me? And we can enjoy all the colors on the path." And he pointed to the grass and said, "That's the greenest green I have ever seen. Isn't it beautiful?" And the old mouse woman said, "Yes, it is beautiful." And so the little mouse spent a day walking slowly with the old mouse woman as they looked at all the bright colors that were already all around them. And that's the end. So that was a little story, like I said, that I was absolutely obsessed with as a little girl. It was largely when I was younger because of just the fact that, well, who wouldn't love to have magical paints that could, you know, create you a pair of trousers and a bird friend and all sorts of wonderful things. So it was originally the magic that I loved as a child, but as an adult now, I look back on that story and I love it for the fact that it reminds me now just about celebrating all the little things that are around us, and that as much as we are really creative beings that can make all sorts of wonderful things, we're already surrounded by a lot of amazing things that are already here. And sometimes the point of creating something is enjoying it and talking about it and sharing it with others, which then goes back to storytelling itself, about how it's a community thing. Storytelling is something that we all share together. It's part of our collective unconsciousness. That's what the mythic imagination is built on. It's everything that just over all these incarnated lifetimes as humans here on the earth, we've built up as under these different symbols and ideas and themes that we use to understand each other and this earthly plane that we live on and all the other dimensions and everything beyond it. And so, in mentioning that, the last few things I wanted to just talk about today, kind of in this intro, that just goes into the other branch of things that I'll delve into deeper as the as time goes on and I do more of these lives that are more specific, is just that you don't need to know a lot of stories to be a storyteller, to examine your dreams, to have imagination. You don't need to know what certain symbols mean that might appear in your dreams or that you notice throughout your day-to-day. All you need is just tuning into what does that symbol mean to you, which was really a huge revelation to me, because as I say that, I have actually had I've had a lot of education on analyzing things to the umpteenth degree. My first degree that I did was in English literature and classics, so studying all sorts of literature, culture, history from ancient Greece, Mesopotamia, Rome, Egypt, and all the way up to the 20th century with just the English literature and all of that. And really, when it comes down to understanding what something means, it's a very individual thing. It goes back to tapping into that inner well that is within you. And although something like a phoenix, for example, stands for a symbol of rebirth and renewal, perhaps for you, there is a different connection, something else that you relate to the phoenix that maybe has to do with the fact that it's a bird and its freedom and its flight, or it being a phoenix and fiery. Perhaps it inspires you to take action, get moving. So neither of those matches with the traditional definition of a phoenix meaning rebirth, but it doesn't make them any more right or wrong. It is what that symbol means to you individually. So one other quick little practice that I really recommend if you're someone who feels like you're not really knowledgeable about what symbols mean or what myths are out there and what different myths are or what different legends are. So if you hear words being thrown around about like Psyche and Pandora and Inanna or Enkidu or Anansi, just throwing out a bunch of figures from various myths and legends, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. I have no idea where to start. Do I need to now spend years and years and years of studying all these meanings and symbols, or what different archetypes like the priestess or the mother or the dark goddess means? No, don't need to do any of that. Because it's just about what does something mean to you when it crops up in your dream, and it crops up in your day-to-day, when it crops up in your daydreams. And a great way to let go of the ego that says, you need to go and study what this symbol means. You need to go find out exactly what this number pattern means. Just push the ego aside. Say, ego, I'm not needing you right now. You can go chill out with a glass of lemonade and I will let you know when I need you again. And instead, use tools like oracle cards, or I really like using tarot cards for this kind of practice, just because they're very, very symbolic in terms of tapping into symbols that have been used for thousands of years, so going into the collective unconsciousness. And instead of looking up, what does each card mean? Just looking at the image on the card. So, like with picking any sort of deck of cards, going for one that you really resonate with, that has beautiful artwork that you totally love. And then you look at the card and you identify first the different things that you see in the card. So, for example, in this card here, we have a man who is playing some sort of musical instrument, and he's sitting on top of a fountain, and what's coming out of the fountain is a whole bunch of gold coins, and that fountain looks a little bit like a dragon to me, and otherwise he's kind of around a beautiful kind of forest scene. So you first identified those things, and then you go a little bit deeper, and you may choose to just think about, okay, what does a whole bunch of money coming out of a water to me? What does sitting on top of this water fountain, just playing a musical instrument, being really lighthearted, being really happy, what does that mean to me? And you can take it even a step further and tell the story of what you see here of, okay, there was a young man who, after a long, long journey, who spent many, many days walking and was so tired, finally reached a beautiful glen where he was able to rest. And when he reached this glen, he had a chance to pull out his oboe and oops, here we go. And he began to play, and as he played and he took pleasure in playing his music, what began to bubble in the waterfalls nearby was all this bright sparkling light that gave him back the energy that he had used in the long, long, long walk, and he felt full of life and vitality once more. So really quickly, just off the top of my head, a little bit of a story about this particular card. And through all of this, I was not paying attention at all to what this card was specifically called, or even what the specific symbols mean within it. Just tapping into, okay, what does this card mean to me, and developing my own personal relationship with it as well. So that's a really great practice for those of you who like kind of hands-on things, especially if you're not used to tapping into that imagination. Use a deck of cards that has some sort of image or scene on it that you really, really resonate with. I would definitely recommend tarot again, but if you resonate more with oracle cards, there are so many oracle cards out there as well that are just beautiful and have very elaborate scenes as well, where you can pull all sorts of stories out of them, or just noticing the different symbols and what those symbols mean to you, how they make you feel. And that is all you have to do. So again, there is no studying that needs to be involved. There's no memorization that needs to be involved in learning about stories and tapping into what is there. You can absolutely go and delve into all sorts of ancient stories, and I will be telling some as we go along here, but that is the heart of it. Just have fun, just enjoy and explore. Just checking the time here. Okay. All right. So with that, I will bid all of you a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you those who have spent some time here with me in this live, this new kind of exploration down different avenue than what I usually do. So going forward, this will be, as I've said many times, very, very exploratory in terms of looking into not only specific stories, but also sharing some stories and continuing on with different practices that we can use with stories. And I'll definitely be spending some lives where I may talk about one specific story and really delve into what we can learn from that story and how that particular story that I'm talking about can help us to explore different aspects of ourselves. So what I'll be going into next week will be delving into something some of you may be familiar with, at least because it's come up a lot in popular culture, and that is the hero's journey. So it's been used a lot in a lot of modern stories. It's been used, well, it was specifically used very intentionally in Star Wars. Most of those movies, except for the most recent ones, follow it exactly. And it's also been used in Harry Potter. That was very hero's journey-esque. It's also been used in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. So there's all sorts of modern stories that really follow that cycle, the hero's journey, which was originally created by Joseph Campbell, kind of in the mid-20th century. So I'm going to be going into that one sometime next week, since it is one that we've all had some experience with, just based on the fact that it's in a lot of the stories that we've consumed and been around in our current time. And it is also one that is an amazing template for going and exploring your life as well, starting right from that call to adventure in your childhood and going all the way around. You might even be at the return point, or might have found yourself having a couple mini hero's journeys all the way throughout your life, or you might find yourself maybe just at the rebirth point of the hero's journey. But anyway, I'm not going to go into that today, just because I don't want to keep these lives going on and on and on for too long, because I can really talk about this topic a lot if I, let myself keep going. So I'll be focusing on the hero's journey next week, and talking a little bit more in detail about it and how you can be using it to explore different experiences that you've had in your life by matching them up with those different stages in that particular cycle. And next week, if I've got the time, I would like to also potentially delve into telling a myth or a legend, but it may be me mostly drawing upon current stories. Again, it all depends on the time. This is free-flowing storytelling and exploration. So, yeah. Thank you, everyone, and thanks, Kirsty. Oh, that's wonderful. Using it as an art creator, yeah. Art is a whole other type of storytelling, which, reminds me. Because music's another passion of mine, and is also another way of telling stories that'll probably come in as well. At some point. Alright, so love and light to you all, and I wish all of you a wonderful rest of your weekend wherever you are. So goodbye for now.